Welcome back, beautiful tri-state area. You're listening to a moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Up next in our Discover Your Potential segment, brought to you by The Wellness Way, we're joined by regular contributor, podcaster, and author Dan Gilman. And today he's joined by Darryll Stinson, author, TEDx speaker, coach, and philanthropist. He's also the co-founder of Seeding Greatness, a movement of leaders restoring the planet and helping humanity to heal through their stories and transformational services. After a tough run as a D1 athlete, Darryll overcame multiple suicide attempts and now empowers many to discover their purpose and live and lead from their highest self. They join me today to chat about the journey from athlete to motivational speaker, overcoming challenges, and building a life you love. Welcoming now to the show is Dan Gilman and Darryll Stinson. Welcome, my friends.
Welcome.
Hey.
So nice to have you on. So, Darryll, before we dive into your recent accomplishments, which there are many, let's first look back on where you've been because it's been quite the journey. So, after earning a full ride scholarship to play D1 football at Central Michigan University, to my understanding, you sustained a severe back injury and began numbing the pain, both physical and emotional, which we know many have done with opioids. And prior to entering your senior year, due to heavy opioid use, you were removed from the active roster, which sent you into a dark depression and ultimately tried to take your life multiple times. Now, you've come quite a long way since this time in your life. Can you share with us the turning point that shifted you from despair to pursuing a path of healing and empowerment?
Yeah, I believe it was Michael Beckwith that says pain pushes until the vision pulls. And the turning point for me is when the pain got so bad that it pushed me out of the depression, the heaviness, the discouragement that I was under. So we talked about the opioid abuse. We talked about, the depression, the suicidal attempts. Well, ultimately, those landed me in a psychiatric unit. And it was there I found faith, I found purpose, I found hope. And then I also learned that through self care, through mindfulness exercise, through journaling, through counseling, through taking a walk, through breathing, meditative exercises, that I could access the same feelings of connectedness, of aliveness that I felt from the external stimuli of sports, even though I wasn't playing. And so it showed me that I could build my life from the inside out and not just the outside in.
It's incredible how you were able to not only turn your life around, but completely shift your path and overall purpose from athlete to speaker, author, and now entrepreneur. I know Dan has some questions. Dan, take it away.
Yeah, as a former Division One athlete, what lessons from your sports career have you applied to overcoming personal challenges?
Well, the thing that pain is temporary and it's part of the process. I think sometimes, people who haven't participated in, high level sports or don't invest in their physical physique at a level that pushes them beyond their comfort zone, that, it just makes sense that, no pain, no gain type of thing. And so, sports taught me that so vividly that, pain is to be expected. Failure is to be expected. It's a part of growth. It's not anti growth. And so when I work out, I'm literally pushing my muscles to failure because that's the point where they grow. If I don't push them to failure, they kind of just stay toned. But if I push them to failure, they get bigger, they get stronger. And so that's a big transferable principle that I brought into my life after sports is I expect there to be failure. I expect there to be pain. I actually look to push my threshold in certain areas so that I feel those failure, so that I feel like a beginner at a new skill or a beginner in a new or a novice in a new room. And so like that's a huge transferable skill. Another one that I'll mention is the ability to be coachable. So many people have, defenses up and they take it personal when they get constructive criticism, or they have a hard time really hearing that type of feedback. But me, I don't just welcome it, I crave it. I actually seek it out. I ask for it because after every practice, after every game, we had to watch film down to the millisecond to be able to dissect even the minor, smallest movement. And so I bring that same mentality into what I do now in my career as a speaker and as a coach. is like I watch my speeches, I listen to my coaching calls, I dissect the minute details in order to see how I can improve. I crave that feedback, even if it's embarrassing, even if I don't like how I sound, even if I lost my train of thought. I'm willing to look at it no matter how messy it is, because that is the path to growth.
Boy, you've come full circle. Congratulations. Now
Thank
let's
you.
talk a little bit about athletic identity. So, athletic identity is the degree to which an individual identifies with the athlete role and looks to others for acknowledgement of that role. And many seasoned athletes fall victim to the extreme end of this because they view their athleticism as their entire identity and sole focus in life. So this identity can quickly turn detrimental when an athlete's career inevitably comes to an end, as you know, especially if it's not by choice, like in your case with your career and ending back injury. Now, bouncing back from this and learning to transition out of your sport is no easy feat, my friend. In fact, I know you have a whole book dedicated to this concept called Who Am I After Sports? An Athlete's Guide to Discovering New Purpose and Live Fulfilled. So I'd love to know more about how your mindset had to change as you moved from being an athlete to becoming an entrepreneur and motivational speaker.
Well, the biggest mindset shift is that I had to stop believing that my athletic days were the best days of my life. I mean, literally, the terminology that a lot of athletes use is the glory days. And for me, that psychology meant that the athletics, my athletic career was the, epitome, the peak of my success. And so life was just downhill from there. And that I had to immediately overcome that, because that was just a discouraging, disempowering way to live. And that just doesn't apply to me and my athletics. That applies to anyone in the season of transition. If you were an executive that had a really great established career for 20 years and you go into a new season and you retire, well, now you got to be a beginner at something else. And, it comes with that identity crisis. Same thing with a relationship, same thing with any type of job or career. When there's a transition, it brings up all of that.
It's interesting because there's certainly some great lesson to take away from your journey, and I really I thank you for being so transparent and open to sharing your story, because I know there are lots of people out there who can relate and look to you for inspiration and paving a new path in life. But again, easier said than done, right? Now, interestingly, according to Linkagol's Fear Factor Index in partnership with YouGov, 1 in 3 Americans were found to be scared of failure, and almost half of the surveyed adults responded that their fear of failure was the biggest barrier to not achieving their goals. In the process of discovering one's purpose and building a thriving career or business, as you empower and teach many to do, facing failure at some point is clearly inevitable, right? So now I know Dan has a question pertaining to this, and I'm interested to hear your answer. Dan?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question that I love to approach. But how do you approach failure, and what advice would you give to someone who's afraid of failing in their endeavors?
Failure, false evidence appearing real. Failure, do the opposite of what it's telling you to do. That's my mindset around failure. It's a false evidence appearing real. It is telling me to do something that I probably need to do the opposite of. It's trying to talk me out of something that I need to talk myself into. So when I encounter failure, I see it that way, and I change my relationship to it so that I head in the opposite direction that it's telling me. If it's telling me I shouldn't, I should. If it's telling me don't, I do. And obviously, if we're talking about, running from a bear or a lion, that's different. Like if it fears telling me to run, I'm going to run. But when it comes to living your dreams, when it comes to doing what's in your heart to do, and if fear is coming through your mind telling you don't do it, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not old enough, you're not educated enough, like you have to say, listen, that is fear trying to talk me out of something that I can talk myself into. So I'll tell myself that's how I should do it. That's how I do it. The other thing is I intentionally put myself in environments that bring up all the things that fear bring up. So I walked on fire, for instance. I'm a certified firewalk instructor, Tony Robbins style. And the sheer act of walking on fire, feeling that those flames being lit, man, it invokes all of those fears. And instead of shrinking, cowering, oh no, we can't do this, we raise our vibration, we raise our energy, we put our energy level at that above a 10, because fire burns at a 10. And by doing so, we're able to walk on hot coals. And so now my relationship with fear changes. When fear gets hot, I get hotter. When fear gets loud, I get louder. And that enables me to move through it way more powerfully.
That's incredible. I love the way you that's a great analogy. Now
Mhm.
let's chat about Second Chance Athletes, which is an organization you founded that specializes in helping former and forgotten athletes succeed in life without the demands of a sport and help them discover their identity and purpose through training and coaching and speaking and connecting them with the right people and organizations, which is what you are incredible at doing. So can you tell us more about this movement and what advice you would give to young athletes who are uncertain about their future beyond sports?
Well, yes, the book got created because at that time felt like I was the only one in the world struggling with this thing called athlete transition. When I started to get vocal about my story, I started to get a huge response from athletes at college, pro, Olympic, all types of levels. And they were like, me too. We're struggling. We didn't even know that it was because of the transition. We thought it was because of this or that or the money or whatever. But it's actually the identity challenges that I'm having in this shift that's creating so much of the statistics that we see about bankruptcy, divorce, drug abuse, and those type of things. And so, because I saw such a need for that conversation to be more prevalent in the mainstream, I started that nonprofit organization and started to, a live interview series and started to really make this conversation like the normal. Now, the pandemic happened, tons of publicity around athletes prioritizing their mental health, Simone Biles, Michael Phelps, you name it. And so it's becoming more of a normal thing that like transition is very hard to deal with. One of my best tips for people is to um, reach out for help and be vulnerable about what you're going through. A lot of athletes and really society in general were taught that emotions are weakness. Like, don't show the enemy, your opponent, a flaw or a weakness. Don't show a kink in your armor. And so when it comes to being vulnerable about the things that they're really struggling with, they lack language, they lack the wherewithal to be able to articulate and express that. And so the best thing you can do is be a little bit more vulnerable about the emotions that are coming up for you, knowing that being non-emotional may have helped you win, but in sports, but it's not going to help you to win in life. And so emotions are a gateway to connection and an overall healthy life. And whatever you don't express, you suppress. And so I highly encourage to get in the healthy process of expression through journaling, through counseling, through having conscious, vulnerable, courageous conversation with people that you know, like, and trust. That will start to help athletes to really get the support that they need because people can't help you conquer what you're unwilling to confront.
Nicely said.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question about looking forward. What kind of legacy do you want to leave? That legacy is important. And how do you measure the impact of your work?
My first place that I look to measure my impact is through my family, my children. I've discovered that there's a lot of speakers who teach what they know. Very few people teach who they do. And very rarely do you find someone who teach who they are, their essence, and how they show up. I do my best to teach who I am, what I live out, what I model for my children. And I think they're the best test of my message. Do they respect me? Do they receive me? Are they following these principles? Would they hold daddy accountable? Am I practicing what I preach? Those type of things. And so my family, the quality of my relationships, the way that we embody the principles that I teach from stage and teach my clients is the biggest test of the results of my work, in my opinion, and it is my legacy. I see my legacy as how I'm remembered. I see it as how I consistently showed up. One of the most powerful things that I did, while it may seem a little morbid, is I wrote my eulogy as if my wife was reading it at my funeral. And what it did is I was having her say all this stuff about how I showed up, how I treated my family, how I ran my business, how I treated my community members, how I showed up as a husband and a father and a friend and a son. And she was saying all these remarks. And what that did was it shaped the course of my action on an everyday basis. That's my true north, is that eulogy. In order for her to authentically say that at my funeral, I have to live it out every single day. It's only going to be said through a lifetime of consistency. So my legacy is living that out, that eulogy every single day. I want to be known for how I love and for how I give. Very simple.
I love your roadmap and I heart your narrative No pun intended. But before we wrap up, because we have less than half a minute left, what are
Yeah.
any upcoming projects or goals, and how do we align with your mission to help others discover their potential?
Man, I'm hosting these transformational events for speakers to really help them to crack the next level of resonance in their message, so that they can reach more people, raise their income, and all that good stuff. Because resonance equals reach, which leads to revenue. And so, if people are looking to grow in that area, we host them. There's no ticket price at the door. It's live in person. It's a chance to really get quality reps and work with one of the world class trainers as it relates to speaking and creating resonance from stage.
Well, thank you for joining us, my friend. We are out of time. It was such a pleasure. Dan, thank you so much for bringing on such an incredible guest.
Thank you.
That was our Discover Your Potential segment, sponsored by The Wellness Way. That was the incredible Darryll Stinson, author, TEDx speaker, coach, and philanthropist. Definitely be sure to check him out online at darrylstinson.com, or check him out on the gram at Stinson Speaks. And of course, to see more of Dan, you can head to discoveryourpotentialshow.com. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. We'll be right back after this.
A Moment of Zen is brought to you by The Wellness Way, your trusted partner in health restoration. Now you can feel amazing at any age with their foundational testing and mind-body approach. The Wellness Way offers in-clinic and telehealth support when you're ready to test, not guess, what your body needs. Discover your best health by visiting their website, thewellnessway.com, and selecting a clinic near you. Do health differently at thewellnessway.com.